I am Chidi Jenkins, and I have the privilege of serving in the Northam administration as advisor on childhood trauma and resiliency. But I'm here just as much as everyone else to listen. And I just want to say, as a person who's been able to visit many of your networks and join some of your meetings over the last few years, it's a privilege to be here with you. And I would like to give the chance to introduce, have the chance to introduce the First Lady who's joining us here for this community conversation with you all as part of the Resilience Tour of the Children's Cabinet. So First Lady, I'll give you the floor, and then you can pass it on to Secretary Qarni.
Great. Well, thank you, Chidi, and thanks to everyone who's giving time to be on this important call today, our Zoom meeting. I wish we could all be together in person to thank you all individually, but it's what an honor to be here with you all today. I appreciate Melissa and Scan for hosting us today, and all the Southside Friends and the TICN and so many other groups that are a part of this who've done incredible work during this really difficult time. So we're just so pleased and so grateful to you for all that you've done for children, especially during this difficult time. And I, like Chidi, look forward to hearing more from you about all of your challenges and your successes over this past year and a half. I'm sorry that Secretary Carey couldn't be here with us today, but as you met the formidable Chidi Jenkins, who most of you know, we're just so happy to have her join us. So this work began with the Children's Cabinet, which I'm very fortunate to be chair of. And for those of you who don't know, it's made up of several secretariats that touch the lives of our children. So the Secretary of Health and Human Resources, which is Secretary Carey, Secretary of Education, Secretary Qarni, who's on the call today, which we're so happy to have him. The two of us were out in the water doing muscle restoration yesterday. So it's glad to see you back and dry, sir. The Secretaries of Agriculture and the Secretary of Public Safety. And we've been engaged in such transformational work around food security, early childhood care and education, maternal fetal health, student safety in schools, and on campuses, and of course, our subject of the day, trauma-informed care. But we know all these things go together, don't they? This tour is it's really an opportunity for the Children's Cabinet to highlight the many incredible individuals and communities, the agencies and organizations who've come together to support children, youth, and families in so many ways, especially over the past year and a half, but really throughout our whole time in the administration. We've already had the opportunity to visit several sites and see the work that you are doing. It's just amazing. It just gives us great hope. Last week, I had the chance to visit Loudoun County schools, where I learned about several social emotional learning programs they had there. 5 school counselors, school psychologists, school nurse, just so many people that were committed to the mental and social emotional health of our children. It was wonderful to see. Yesterday, Secretary Carey joined Senator Mason for a conversation about the significant need for support for youth in our foster system as they age and transition into the workforce. The need for trauma-informed care and more awareness in our business community in order to become more inclusive and welcoming, embracing of this resilient community of incredible young people. There are so many amazing things happening in our Commonwealth, and your trauma-informed community networks have been a great part of that effort. It shows that in our Commonwealth, children could thrive where they live, learn, and play. The governor and I say there's great power and potential in every child, and every child deserves an opportunity to have healthy food, adequate housing, health care, excellent education, the support of a thriving community, and the laughter of a loving home. And you all are so much an integral part of making that magic happen. I'm looking forward to hearing about the amazing work that you've done to respond to trauma and to build resilience in your wonderful communities, but also what supports are still needed for you to do your jobs even better. As I said last week to the folks in Northern Virginia, we're preparing to hand off to a new administration, so please don't forget to go out and vote. But what we learn on this tour really helped to inform the governor's outgoing legislative and budget priorities, and it will allow us to better brief and prepare the leaders of the next Children's Cabinet on where they should focus their efforts moving forward. So thank you so very much, and I'll hand it off to you all again.
Secretary Qarni, did you want to make a few brief remarks as well?
Sure thing, Chidi. Thank you so much for having me on. It's great to be here with all the great people in this community conversation on trauma and resiliency. The Trauma Informed Communities Network in Central Virginia, you all are doing some amazing work. And thank you, First Lady and Chidi, for your leadership as educators. Having been in the classroom, you bring that firsthand experience. And I know, Chidi, health and wellness has been on your mind since you entered the education profession. So thank you so much for bringing those expertise and really leading Virginia in this work. As the First Lady mentioned, we were touring yesterday. We're always touring, and this is a great month to really highlight the work to address trauma and resiliency work that's happening across the Commonwealth. I've had a chance to go to several schools. Recently was at one actually at Potomac Shores in the middle. They had just launched their wellness room center, and it was amazing. Just as soon as I walked in, I just felt so relaxed and was able to decompress. And it's just amazing to see all this great work. Since the beginning, in the administration, we've always taken a whole child approach and really focusing on all of the needs of students. The biopsychosocial needs, the social and emotional learning is so important to us. That's why we work collectively to implement social emotional learning standards. One silver lining with the pandemic is that it's also given us an opportunity to think deeper about the adverse childhood experiences that the students might be facing, and also think about the practices of resiliency amongst our educators as well, and their mental health and wellness as well. Is really, really critical. We've led the work on getting more school counselors in our schools, but also thinking about other student support staff in our recent initiatives to focus on school psychologists and social workers and nurses. But this cross collaboration amongst different agencies and different communities, different family serving sectors is so important to continue to provide the care and services, and take not only a whole child approach, but a whole family, trauma-informed, and an equity-focused approach is so critical. So I'm just so excited to be here with you all and really listen and learn about all the great things you all are doing. And thank you for allowing me to parachute in today. Chidi, back to you.
I'll actually let Melissa take it from here. We're all ears.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. So my name is Melissa Mcginn. I'm with Greater Richmond SCAN. I oversee all of SCAN's community-based prevention programs, and I serve as the state coordinator for Virginia's trauma-informed community networks. So there are 26 of these networks across Virginia, so in communities all over the state. These community networks really focus on trying to build a more resilient community by working towards preventing and mitigating the impact of adverse childhood experiences and community trauma, and really trying to advance trauma-informed practices and policies across our region. Today with us, we have members from the Central Virginia TICNs. They include the Southside Trauma-Informed Community Network, who is also serving as our host today. We have several members of the Greater Richmond Trauma-Informed Community Network, the Caroline Community Resilience Network, and the Blue Ridge Community Resilience Network. So let's get to our first question. What I'm going to ask each of you is if you could briefly introduce yourselves and share an example of your network's impact that helped to promote resilience during the pandemic. And why don't we start with our hosts, the Southside Trauma-Informed Community Network, Brian Little and Denise Miller, whoever would like to go first.
Thank you, Melissa. I'll go first. I'm Brian Little with the Crater Health District. I am the Special Projects Coordinator. I'm also a convener with the Southside Trauma-Informed Community Network, our Southside TICN, if you will. And I'll kick it off and then pass it over to Denise. We have done a lot of work, actually, as it relates to building community resilience. Our network started about 5 years ago when we heard a lecture about trauma-informed care, and it kind of grew from a library room to a group of people that were energized to do something in our community. And so we serve 9 different areas within the southern region, if you will, outside of Richmond, beginning with Petersburg, going all the way down to Surrey, Sussex, Emporia, and Greensville. But we have been together for 5 years. We have been the community arm of the Virginia Department of Health's Crater Health District in Petersburg, Virginia, and in the Crater Health District. And we just came out of our second Beyond ACE's Building Community Resilience Summit that we had at Petersburg High School in summer of 2019. And then we started to see how America kind of just unfolded differently with the George Floyd scenarios that happened across our television sets. And then we moved into the pandemic after that. We were at a place where we were just coming out of a summit that addressed the effects of race, culture, and poverty. And the pandemic basically revealed to us that these subjects were still very relevant in our community. So we decided that we would look inward first. We would look to our network of providers and try to figure out what their internal needs were. So we began to do a needs assessment, and we discovered that in addition to our meetings that we would have, we needed to have a check-in with our members to see how people were doing, to kind of check the temperature in the room, if you will. And so as a part of our building community resilience during the pandemic, we met monthly on first Thursdays at 10 a.m. via Zoom. We had several different honesty sessions, listening sessions, honesty sessions, where we just basically got it out, started talking about what is happening. And then we realized that we needed to accept the energy in the room and accept the lived experience that we all brought to the table. Our network is made up of both professionals and people with lived experiences, grandmas and single parents and people who are out in the community making things happen on a regular basis. But we checked in first internally, and then we moved externally to begin to understand how to help to change the culture, or at least to begin to address listening to our community. And so we started partnering with several different organizations throughout our 9 localities. And one example that comes to mind, well, there are a couple, but the first one I'd like to suggest or share with you all is the Feed the Need program that the city of Petersburg had, where they fed 20,000 people, both for Thanksgiving and for Christmas. Food is a basic need for all humans. And so we wanted to literally peel off the layers of bureaucracy and try to understand what the need was. So with empathy, we were listening to the need of the community. And one of our community partners, the city of Petersburg, basically decided to lead a charge with their Recovery Act fund and feed their community, because there are several food deserts in the Petersburg region. It was a great way to feed 20,000 people. And it was a true community effort that we heard about. Now, let me say, we did not lead it, but we were a part of it. And as we are a network, we come together to basically hone our energies to be able to solve problems. And then towards the end of December of 2020, we had the opportunity to work with the Department of Social Services and apply for a Family and Children's Trust Fund Service Award. And so we were able to actually apply and win the service award. We were the first, I believe, in the state of Virginia to receive funds. And we were able to impact families financially by giving out service awards to 10 worthy families in the city of Petersburg. But we realized that, we have Hopewell and Dinwiddie and Prince George and Surrey and Sussex and Emporia and Greensville, and the list goes on. So we know that if we do that type of programming again, that we want to reach our rural areas and be able to touch them very heavily. One of the other things that we did, I'm going to turn it over to Denise to talk about this, we did a lot of programming. month after month, we try to bring very simplistic nuggets of information to the people in our community. And I'm going to ask Denise if she would talk a little bit about the programs that we did.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Denise Miller. For our Southside TICN, I am the co-chair of the programs committee. For my everyday job, I work with Smart Beginning Southeast. I work primarily with coordinating early childhood food security. So as Brian said, we're just really proud that we were able to continue to work with our programs and have those programs throughout the pandemic. You know, oftentimes we say trauma doesn't stop just because it's the weekend or just because it's summertime or Christmas break. And the same goes for in the middle of the pandemic. If anything, the trauma really increased during the pandemic because we saw so many other issues like food security, mental health, and so forth increase. So we really felt like it was important to continue to hold our monthly check-ins, as Brian mentioned, just to make sure we were really taking care of ourselves before we were expected to go out and take care of others. So we sent out a survey amongst our members to really gauge the interest and where they felt like the needs would lie. And we then took those results and really helped to shape where we move forward. We had programs as far as basics with resilience and trauma. We did a lot of self-care, and it wasn't just, you know, take a walk and take a hot bath, but more of guided meditation. We talked a lot about secondary trauma. As you know, we were really excited when everyone could return to school this fall, but that brought a lot of anxiety from teachers and students and families. So again, we talked a lot about secondary trauma. So as Brian mentioned, we really just tried to listen to our network and listen to our families and the community that we serve and make sure that really guided where we went with our programs and made sure that we were really trying to fill the needs of those that we work with and we serve.
Thank you both. I want to toss it to the Greater Richmond Trauma Informed Community Network. We have Amanda Lynch and Blair Bell who are representing the GRTICN. So whoever would like to introduce yourselves and to talk a little bit about your network's impact, the examples of what your network did to really help to promote resilience during the pandemic.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. My name is Blair Bell. I am the Director for Women's and Children's Service Line for Bon Secours Richmond and have been leading the trauma-informed care work for Bon Secours for several years now. A lot of our work first started around education. We had done some focus groups and found that when we talked about trauma for healthcare workers, people were thinking car accidents, they were thinking domestic violence, and we needed to get deeper and really go into the smaller traumas that still impacted our patients and our associates. So we did a lot of work around educating our team on what is trauma and the lasting effects on trauma on both mental and physical health. That then led us down the path of taking care of our caregivers during COVID. We knew that we needed to really support our team so that they could be the best support for our patients and their families. I'm doing a lot of work on resilience, forming oasis rooms, just areas that our caregivers could go and debrief after a death or after a hard situation. A lot of work around safe care, meditation, debriefing with counselors, and having that support system there and put in place. And then also really making sure that the caregivers understood that they also were experiencing trauma. And when they were caring for patients, they really need to make sure they were looking through a trauma-informed care lens and treating the need, not just the behavior. We've seen a lot of our patients and our families act in ways that we've never seen them before because of the stress and the trauma that they're under, and just making sure that we took the time to really dig deep and really find that need and treat the need and not just respond to the behavior.
Thank you, Blair, and good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here today. I am the Trauma-Informed Training and Prevention Specialist at Greater Richmond SCAN. Prior to coming into my role here at SCAN, I was a classroom teacher for a really long time. And so much of our work on community programs team is working within the schools, but also working within the community with businesses, whether they're nonprofit or for-profit, also being embedded within the Boys and Girls Clubs of Richmond. And so taking a systems approach there from top to bottom. And so helping to create some foundational definitions and fidelity there from our board down to our families and back up. We've spent a lot of time throughout this global pause training thousands of Central Virginians on trauma-informed practices, staff and student wellness. We have teams that are embedded in both Henrico County Public Schools, but also within Richmond City Public Schools. Many of the young people and families that we serve have come back with mental health struggles, substance abuse struggles. Teachers certainly are struggling with stress of virtual and then in-person and virtual learning. And so really meeting families, school staff, and community members right where they are. We've also spent some time training our CASA workers on what trauma and resilience look like, taking it one step beyond the traditional definition of ACEs, and also looking at adverse colonial experiences, after COVID experiences, and talking to community members about some things that they may see within the students, communities, clients that they serve. And so, I think that those are some of the things that Greater Richmond TICN has certainly focused on this year. I'm also a member of TICNs, so very excited to see my friends from Southside Trauma Informed Community Network, where last year we also spent some time working with Dr. Hart in Virginia State Radio to work with students that were on campus, but also in the community to answer questions they may have had about COVID, but also to develop some wellness work there as well.
Thank you both. I'd like to turn it over to Antonio Clinkscales from Caroline Community Resilience Network.
Hey, good morning. Again, my name is Antonio Clinkscales, local pastor and the community manager for the Caroline, Virginia Community Resilience Network. I'm glad to be here to share with you guys today. We have partnered also with our local school division, Department of Social Services, and our local sheriff's office, community advocates, agencies, and businesses, and just caring individuals in our community who have the same passion around the ACEs science and trying to transform our community into a resilient community. We've been in existence for 3 years now, and focus mostly the first couple years on education, because people have heard the buzzword of trauma-informed or resiliency, but really didn't know what it was or how it applied to them individually or within their organization. So we spent a lot of time over the first couple of years trying to educate the greater community. We've shown the movie Resilience and had a panel discussion afterwards that we opened it up to the community and had great responses and great dialogue. We've talked about, I think it's already been mentioned about George Floyd and how that has impacted our community. We've hosted a virtual summit, which we call the Tackling Trauma Together virtual summit. We had the Northeast Regional facilitator, Allison Sabula, to be our keynote and shared some great information. We had a tremendous turnout for that virtual summit. So again, we spent a lot of time at trying to educate our community, being out in the community, sharing information. We meet quarterly, but we share monthly e-blast newsletters to keep everyone informed in the movement, the flame lit, if you will. And we're excited about the direction that we're moving, and we're trying to transition now from education into implementation. And we have done some initial surveys, and provided some training for some local agencies as well, where they've tapped into regional trainings on how to implement trauma-informed and resilient practices within their organization to be able to provide the best care possible. So again, we're trying to bring as many partners along this journey, this movement within our community where we can have the best change.
Thank you, Antonio. And now I'll turn it over to Blue Ridge Community Resilience Network and Megan Lacey.
Hi, I'm Megan Lacey. I'm the program director with Blue Ridge CASA, and I'm also the current coordinator for Blue Ridge Community Resilience Network. We are a very small network that is just getting started. And we have been working with our community in Stanton, Augusta County, and Waynesboro with a mental health task force and looking at ways that we can support the school systems, the teachers, the students, and then also our community partners like the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA. So we are just kind of looking at how we can get people in to just work with the kids, build some connection. And so that's what we've been doing.
Thanks, Megan. I would just also add, when we think about ways that we've helped to promote resilience for the last 2 years, the first week of May, all of the trauma-informed community networks have come together to put on Resilience Week Virginia. So it started at the beginning of the pandemic back in 2020, and we did it again this year, and we plan to do it again in 2022. But it was an opportunity for networks to kind of connect with local community partners and community members to host just a series of events, everything from our local libraries and our museums, our school districts, to just individual events that were happening, panel discussions. But it really was an opportunity to really kind of come together to continue to have just that sense of connection and wellness and be with one another during these difficult times. So I want to kind of pivot to the next question for all of you. When you think about kind of what issues have emerged for children and families in your communities since the start of the pandemic, particularly for different populations that you serve, such as economically disadvantaged families, immigrant families, LGBTQ plus youth, Black, Brown children, etc. And thinking about, this really is your opportunity to really thinking about, what is needed moving forward. What would you want the next administration to know? And let's go back to Southside.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm thinking we have several things. The first area that we want to focus on, of course, I'm with the health department, but we talk all the time about the social determinants of health and how the social determinants of health really do play a major role in the development of our future in terms of where people live. And I'm going to add a few words to this: live, work, play, study, and pray. These are areas that we need to continuously focus on. And I was so glad to hear the First Lady talk about that in her opening statement. Certainly, when we think of where people live, we have a lot of people living in poverty. We have people living in areas where there is not clean water to drink, or showers to take, or bathing facilities, because perhaps they're in a trailer park and the water's been cut off because a water main broke. And certainly if we listen to the news, we hear those stories all the time. Those things impact where people live, which oftentimes impact how they work. So if they can't get clean water, they may not go to work because they have not bathed. So these are very simplistic things that continue to plague our communities, and we have to continue to work through those things. I mentioned play. Play is so important for children and their development. And what we've seen in the pandemic is that isolation is a real downer in some cases, because we need the human touch to be able to connect, breathe, and release together. And so if there are ways that we can continue to look at play as a subject for children moving forward in their social development, it possibly will help with their outcomes. Study, we talked about education. It's important to look at education as we move forward and try to figure out how we make education equal for all people, whether you're in an impoverished area or if you're in another area of town that has everything that you need. Even looking at places of worship and looking at how segregated they are and how coming together creates a richer experience for everybody. When the cultures of people come together, those practices come together and sometimes create new norms that increase the village for people of color, for people in different, shall I say, different segments of life, or people who identify differently. So those things are important. But moving forward, there needs to be a continuous flow of funding to keep this work alive. We that are volunteering in the community to make things happen know that we want to offer more opportunities for people to get employment, to learn more, to become more trauma informed, to be able to take this information back into their homes and create a trauma informed environment, because people go home with stress and there's nobody there, or there is somebody there and that person might actually get the stressors of the day from their mate, from their parent, from their child. Smooth transitions are very important, and I'm so glad that we're having this listening tour, because this sets the foundation for a smooth transition into the next administration. But my last word I want to say is sustainability. Sustainability is key to all of these things. So if we can't sustain the work that we're doing in the community, we find ourselves back at ground zero. And none of us want to be back at ground zero. We remember what it looked like before we got the vaccine. And we know that we've had 700,000 people to pass. So we don't want to go back to ground zero. We want to be able to sustain and grow from this moment forward. Denise, did you have anything to add?
No, I think you covered that one all beautifully. We can move to the next network.
Thank you, Brian. We appreciate you. So let's toss it over to Greater Richmond TICN, Amanda or Blair.
I think from the healthcare setting, we know that healthcare can be triggering for families prior to the pandemic, and it's even gotten worse with COVID. People aren't wanting to come to their appointments. They don't want to come to the hospital, but making sure that families understand that their healthcare provider is there to work with them, and they can be a trusting relationship for that family and really be part of their team. One of the needs that I see is making sure that we have access to mental health resources. We're often doing screenings that we find where patients could use proactively mental health resources, and we don't have access to them. Whether we could have additional funding for more social workers within our clinics that could be reimbursed through insurances, or if we could have more community resources to refer these patients out. But really making sure that families understand that their healthcare providers are part of their team. They want to be with them and walk through the journey, because all of our goals to have healthy children thriving in our community.
And I'd like to just add as well, from the education end, recognizing that many of our students have maybe never even been in their school buildings. And so if you're looking at the secondary level, for example, our current 8th grade students spent maybe 6 months in their middle schools, seventh graders were all virtual, and as were sixth graders. And so this is a new learning environment for many of our young people. And so, we keep saying, let's give teachers grace, right? But it's really hard to do that with the expectations that sometimes can be placed to stay on pace or to stay on script. And so recognizing that kids are going to come back with some learning gaps and providing funding to help catch kids up. I think also it was very encouraging to hear Secretary Qarni speak about the social emotional learning objectives and the emphasis that's being placed there. And so sort of taking, Virginia, I think, has taken the lead with much of this trauma-informed schools work. And so looking at things from an equity lens, recognizing that not all of our kids were in healthy, happy learning environments last year. And so as we move forward with assessing students, making sure that we are providing those culturally responsive supports, whether it's through school staff, whether it's through support staff or clinicians and healthcare providers that might even be embedded within the school, I think will help to offset some of the behaviors that kids are coming back with. And I think many of us here would agree that behavior is just another form of communication, right? And so a lot of our kids have had unmet needs over the last 18 months. And we know that CPS calls were down, but mental health and substance abuse crisis is up. And so just being realistic as we look at funding, as we look at the requirements that are within our collegiate training programs for future teachers and future social workers, and providing scholarship opportunities there as well, so that kids have access to those supportive adults that they need within their school buildings, and that parents don't have to always go out and look for those things out in the community.
Thanks, Amanda. I'd like to turn it over to Antonio from Caroline Resilience Community Network.
I'm glad that the First Lady is on, and I'm glad that the Secretary is here as well, and everyone else. I want to give a very quick history lesson. Caroline is very unique from the respect that it is the home of Secretariat, was born here, the Triple Crown winner, and the loving family that integrated interracial marriage in 1958 with the Supreme Court ruling. Therefore, we are a resilient community. And having said that, we face a unique challenge in this rural community because we have two divides. We have Fort AP Hill that divides our community, our county, into literally 5 silos of communities, and also divided by I-95, which further divides our community because to the left of I-95 is a more developed portion of our county, and the right of our community is still the very rural and left behind portion of the community. So we literally have two divides that we have to overcome in terms of education, in terms of access to care, in terms of housing, you name it, there's a huge divide. It's not just an economic divide, but it is poverty and racial divides, depending on what side of 95 that you live on. So there are a lot of issues, but at the same time, having said all of that, we're still resilient. We're still attempting to come together and partner again with the schools and how we look at education, as Ms. Lynch just mentioned, what resources are needed inside the schools, because the schools are just a microcosm of the community. So whatever's happening in the community just walks right through the front door. Brian also mentioned the faith community. We're trying to partner with more faith leaders, which I'm one of them, but that's been a challenge within itself, trying to educate them the importance of mental health in this community. But with those divides, access to care, we're seeing an uptick in substance abuse and domestic violence incidents and cases in our community due to the pandemic. The stressors are not only with the children, but the adults, and it's transferring to every area of our everyday life and our community. But at the same time, we still have a lot of individuals who are trying to fight this good fight and still on the battlefield. We're not giving up, even though we have those huge divides and challenges within our rural community. We're still pressing forward. Our momentum is building, and we're still trying to make a difference.
Thank you, Antonio. I'd like to turn it over to Megan Lacey with Blue Ridge. Megan, if you could just share a little bit about the issues that are emerging in your community and in Blue Ridge, and just what you feel is needed moving forward.
I think Blair and Amanda said a really great thing earlier when they were talking about the school and our children who have not really been in the building for very long. We have definitely seen that there's been a struggle from the virtual learning to in-person learning, and our schools don't have enough resources to really handle all of the things that are coming in. And especially when Antonio said what's happening in the community is what they're bringing into the school system. And we just need people.
Thanks, Megan. I wanted to offer an opportunity to First Lady Northam or Secretary Qarni, if you had any just kind of comments or questions, feedback for the group as you kind of heard some of their responses.
I'll step in, then I'll let Secretary Qarni. Just blown away by the amount of incredible work that you all do every day. And we're, again, the governor and I, the Commonwealth, are just so very grateful for all that you all provide for our children, especially during this difficult time. And you are so right. They're strong, they're resilient, they're going to be okay. And it will be in large part because of each and every one of you. And I so appreciate you talking about keeping up the good fight, because please, we appreciate you. Hold on a little longer, keep up the good fight, because together we are a powerful force for good. And I'm reminded of the gentle but powerful words of Fred Rogers. You know, he said, we live in a world in which we need to share responsibility. It's easy to say, it's not my child, not my community, not my world, not my problem. And then there are those heroes who see the need and respond. I consider those people my superheroes, and that's each and every one of you. So thank you all so very much for holding on for our children, and we so are very appreciative. Keep up the great work, and we will pass your tremendous information on into the future. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for this. Is really informative, and just the ideas are always generating. So what you all shared with us, I was thinking, I think it was Mr. Little who was talking about the basic needs and food insecurities and housing insecurities and not having clean water to bathe and so forth. And just we're thinking about this all the time and taking this whole systems approach, because in addition to K-12, we are addressing some of these insecurities in our higher education settings as well, with our community college students or four-year students who we sometimes forget when they leave the K-12 system, and taking a whole society approach. So everything that you all said really resonated with us, and we'll continue to think through it and improve our society to uplift a lot of folks. So thank you so much. This was really informative.
Well, I just want to thank all of the participants today. I also want to really thank the First Lady and Secretary Qarni and just the Northam administration for being so tremendously supportive to this work for the last 4 years. We really, truly appreciate it. Thank you to the networks for coming and sharing your stories and your experiences and the great work that's happening in your communities. Next week, I hope you're able to join us. The First Lady is continuing her tour across the state, and I think the next one you're doing is in person, possibly in the eastern region of the state. So we have at least 4 or 5 other networks that will be participating, and then we'll be wrapping up the tour in Southwest Virginia later in the month. So stay tuned for more information. Again, thank you so much for your time today. Take care.